This is my true story. I worked my whole life so my daughter could live in comfort. I gave her everything, my time, my strength, my dreams. I thought when I grew old, she would honor me with love and pride. But one day, she looked me in the eye and said, "Please don't come. You'll ruin my weddings and photos." Those words shattered me. The wedding I built with my own hands no longer had a place for me. My heart broke that day. But I was not powerless. I stood up, and you won't believe what I did next. Before that, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. I worked long hours every single day. I woke up before the sun and came home after it was gone. My hands were always sore, my back always stiff, my eyes always tired. I took every shift I could get. I said no to rest, no to comfort, and no to my own dreams, all so my daughter could have more than I ever did. I wanted her to never know the taste of hunger or the weight of unpaid bills. I wanted her to walk in a world that did not look down on her like it once did on me. I skipped meals so she could eat better ones. I wore old shoes so she could wear new ones. I worked through sickness, through storms, through holidays. I missed birthdays, school plays, and quiet dinners because money was the only way to keep her world safe. I told myself it was worth it. Every sore muscle, every lonely night, every time I sat in the dark kitchen with a tired heart. It was all worth it because she was smiling, learning, and living the life I wanted for her. I paid for her school when it seemed impossible. I took loans, sold tools, picked extra hours. I paid for her books, her clothes, her first apartment. When she wanted to study in another city, I packed her things, hugged her, and told her to make me proud. I believed that every dollar I gave was an investment in her happiness, not a loss to myself. I wanted her to see that my love was not in words, but in actions. Years went by. My hair turned gray, my strength started to fade. But I never slowed down. I carried the pride of a man who had done everything he could. I never asked for anything back. I never complained. I never said she owed me. I only dreamed that one day she might look at me and see more than a tired man. She might see the reason she stood where she did. I listened to her talk about her plans, her friends, her new life. Sometimes she spoke fast, forgetting I was there, forgetting I didn't always understand her new world. But I smiled anyway. I nodded, even when I didn't get every word. I didn't want to seem out of place. I just wanted to belong somewhere in her life, even if it was small. When she spoke about her wedding, my heart lifted. I imagined walking her down the aisle. I imagined the crowd, the music, the laughter. I imagined her holding my arm, smiling the same smile she had as a little girl. I imagined she might whisper, "Thank you," maybe just once. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about meaning. I wanted to feel that everything I had given had led to this, a moment of peace, of love, of recognition. I started saving again. I wanted to help with the wedding, even if she said she didn't need it. I wanted to give her something special, something from me. I wanted to show her that no matter how far she went, she still had a father who would give everything for her. But deep inside, a quiet fear grew. She had changed. The way she talked, the way she looked at me, the way she brushed off my small gifts. She lived in a different world now, one that didn't understand calloused hands or worn-out boots. Still, I held on. Because love does not stop when respect fades. Love keeps working, keeps hoping, keeps waiting for one soft word to make it all right again. I never stopped believing that her wedding day would be proof that I had done well, that my hard life had built something beautiful, that she would finally see me not as a tired man, but as the father who never gave up. I thought that day would heal everything. I thought that day would bring me back into her heart. I thought that day would remind her where she came from. I didn't know that the same dream I built my whole life around would soon be used to break me. It started small, almost invisible. A change in how she looked at me, a change in how she spoke. She used to smile when I told stories, but now she sighed. She used to hold my arm when we walked, but now she walked ahead, her phone in hand, her eyes on someone else. The space between us grew quiet, cold, and heavy. I didn't understand why, but I could feel it. Something inside her was moving away. She began to correct me when I spoke. Not gently, not with love, but with that sharp tone people use when they are embarrassed. When I said something simple, she told me to say it better. When I laughed too loud, she told me to calm down. When I used old words, she rolled her eyes. I would go silent then, trying to shrink myself small, trying not to make her feel ashamed. But each correction felt like a tiny crack in the wall between us, and each crack carried pain I could not show. One day she introduced me to her fiancé. I stood straight, cleaned my hands, wore my best shirt. I smiled with nervous pride. She said, "This is my dad. He's simple." That word burned through me like fire. Simple. As if years of sacrifice could be reduced to one small word. As if breaking my back for her dreams made me less. I smiled anyway, because that is what fathers do. But behind that smile, something fragile broke. I started noticing how she looked at my hands, at my clothes, at my old car. The same hands that once carried her through sickness now looked too rough. The same arms that built her future now seemed out of place. I could see it in her eyes, a mix of pride and shame, as if she wanted to love me but also wanted to hide me. It was not hate, it was worse. It was embarrassment. I told myself it was just the world she lived in now, a world of clean suits, fine words, and perfect smiles. I didn't belong there. I was just the man who had made it possible. I kept quiet, sat in the background, and watched her live the life I had built with my own pain. Every time she looked away from me, I told myself it was okay. Every time she ignored my words, I told myself she was busy. Every time she corrected me, I told myself she didn't mean it. But late at night when the house was silent, the truth whispered back. I had lost her long before the wedding. I had lost her to pride, to image, to the world that said a father like me was something to hide. I never said it out loud. I didn't want to believe it. But every word she said, every look she gave, chipped away at the respect that once tied us together. I began to understand that love can survive many things: hunger, distance, pain, but it struggles against shame. When a child starts feeling ashamed of the person who gave them everything, the bond begins to die. And I could feel that death, slow and quiet, taking place right in front of me. I still smiled when she spoke about her wedding. I still said I was proud. I still planned my suit and thought about the gift I would bring. But deep inside, a small part of me had already gone dark. I could feel her slipping away, and there was nothing my hard hands or soft heart could do to stop it. I didn't know it yet, but the cracks had already turned into walls, and soon she would make sure those walls were high enough that I could never cross them again. A week before the wedding, the phone rang. I saw her name and smiled. I thought maybe she wanted to talk, maybe she needed help, maybe she missed me. I wiped my hands, sat down, and answered with hope in my voice. But the words that came from her were not warm. They were cold, flat, practiced. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She just spoke like someone finishing a task they didn't want to do. She told me not to come. Her voice did not shake. Her tone did not break. She said it as if she were talking to a stranger. She said I would ruin the photos. Those words hit harder than any blow I had ever taken. I sat there, the phone still against my ear, waiting for her to say it was a joke, waiting for her to soften, to explain. But she didn't. There was no guilt, no pause, no hesitation. Just silence after the last word. Then the line went dead. I didn't move. The world around me froze. The sound of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the faint wind outside. They all seemed far away. My chest felt heavy, my throat dry. I looked at the phone, at her name still glowing on the screen, and I wanted to call back. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to remind her of the nights I stayed awake for her, the meals I skipped, the love that built her life. But I didn't. Because a father's heart knows when a door has been shut for good. I sat at the table staring at the empty space in front of me. My hands shook. My breath came slow. I thought of all the years that led to this one moment. Every sacrifice, every smile, every hope. All of it erased by one sentence. I didn't know what hurt more, the cruelty of her words or how easily she said them. I had imagined walking her down the aisle, proud, trembling, holding back tears of joy. I had imagined guests smiling, music playing, my daughter glowing with happiness. Now all of that was gone. In its place was only the echo of her voice telling me I didn't belong. Not in her photos, not in her moment, not in her life. I wanted to be angry, but there was no anger left in me, only emptiness. I had spent so many years giving, forgiving, and hoping that I no longer knew how to hate. I just sat there, broken in silence, thinking of all the times she had once said she loved me. I tried to remember those words, but now they sounded like something from another lifetime. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the little girl who used to run to me after school, the one who would hold my finger when crossing the street, the one who cried when I left for work. I tried to find her in the woman who had just banned me from her wedding, but she was gone. The world had taken her. Or maybe I had built her so strong, so ambitious, that she no longer needed to look back. When morning came, I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I just sat there with the phone beside me, waiting for her to call again, to say she didn't mean it. But the call never came. The silence was my answer. And in that silence, something inside me finally gave way. Not in anger, not in hate, but in sorrow. The kind of sorrow that settles deep and stays forever. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen. The same kitchen that had seen birthdays, laughter, and late-night talks. The same kitchen where I once waited for her to come home from school, where I used to make her favorite meals when she cried, where I counted every dollar to make sure she could live her dreams. Now it was silent. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the room. The chair beside me was empty, but I still found myself glancing at it as if she might walk in any second and say she was sorry. She didn't. I looked around the room, and every corner held a memory. The old photo of her first day of school. The drawing she made when she was little. Me with a smile, her holding my hand. The marks on the wall where I measured her height every year. I touched them gently, my fingers tracing the small lines. Each one felt like a promise that time had broken. I remembered how I once sold my truck to pay for her tuition. That truck was more than a vehicle. It was my pride, my independence, my way to work. But when the college bill came, I sold it without a second thought. I took the bus to work after that. Sometimes I walked in the rain. But every drop that fell on me then had felt like proof of my love. Now, those sacrifices sat in the shadows, unseen, forgotten. I realized something that night. I had built a woman who valued image more than blood. I had given her everything, but somewhere along the way, she learned to measure love in appearances, not in effort. She cared about how things looked, not what they meant. She wanted a perfect picture, not a real family. I had worked my whole life to give her the world, and now that world had no place for me. I didn't cry. My eyes were dry, but my chest ached like it was filled with stone. I sat still, hands on the table, heart heavy but clear. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was understanding. A sharp, cold understanding that some love stories end without a fight. They just fade quietly, while one person keeps giving and the other keeps taking until there's nothing left. I had always thought that hard work could fix anything. That if I just tried harder, she would see. But now I saw the truth. Love cannot grow in someone who only sees weakness where there was once strength. She didn't hate me. She was ashamed of me. And that was worse than hate. Hate means you still feel. Shame means you wish the person didn't exist. I thought of calling her again, just once, to tell her I loved her, to tell her that no matter what she said, I would still be proud. But then I realized that love is not always enough. Sometimes silence is the last act of dignity a person can keep. So I stayed quiet. I looked out the window. The street was dark, wet from rain. I could see my reflection faintly in the glass. Tired eyes, wrinkled skin, A man who had given his best years to someone who no longer saw him. I thought about how life can be cruel in quiet ways. Not through tragedy, but through small cuts that never heal. Words that sound polite but kill you slowly. I sat there until the coffee went cold, until my back hurt, until the clock said morning. Then I stood up, turned off the light, and went to bed without dreams. In that stillness, I understood the final truth. She thought shame could erase me. But she didn't know that a father like me could never be erased. Not by silence, not by distance, not even by betrayal. Days passed in silence. I didn't call her, and she didn't call me. The house stayed quiet, but my mind did not. I sat at my old desk, sorting through papers, bills, and contracts. That was when I saw the name again, my name, printed neatly at the bottom of every page. The venue, the catering, the decorations, the orchestra, even the flower company. Every single thing for her wedding had gone through my business, my money, my signature, my work. The same man she had called too simple was the one holding her entire celebration together. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the papers. The irony was heavy. The daughter who erased me had built her dream on the foundation I had quietly provided. Every smiling photo she planned to take, every guest she invited, every light that was supposed to shine, all of it existed because of me. She thought she was building a new life far from her father's hands, but it was still my hands that made it possible. I had signed the contracts months ago, before she told me not to come. Back then, I wanted to surprise her, to give her something that would make her proud. I used my business connections, my long-earned trust, my savings. I made sure everything was perfect. The venue was grand, the service flawless. I wanted people to say her wedding was beautiful. Now, as I looked at those papers, I realized she had no idea who owned her dream. It almost made me laugh. Not out of joy, but out of disbelief. All her pride, all her distance, all her talk about image. And still, it was my name keeping her day alive. Without me, there would be no wedding, no music, no food, no guests, no ceremony. She had forgotten that power does not always wear fancy clothes or speak in perfect words. Sometimes, power sits quietly in worn-out hands that built everything from nothing. I picked up one of the contracts and read it slowly. My name in ink, my company's stamp, my payments. She could ban me from the wedding, but she couldn't erase me from what existed because of me. Every chair that would hold a guest, every plate that would serve a meal, every flower that would decorate the hall, all of it was my doing, and she didn't even know it. I thought about calling the venue manager, maybe just to confirm, but I didn't. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The truth was already there, quiet but clear. I had never needed to shout to have power. My whole life was built on quiet strength, the kind that works when no one is watching. And now, that strength was the very thing holding up the day she said I would ruin. I looked around my office. The walls were lined with certificates, photos of finished projects, memories of years spent building a name that people respected. For the first time, I realized that she had never truly seen me, not as a man, not as a builder, not as someone who could shape the world around him. To her, I was just Dad, the old man from another time. But in reality, I was the reason her perfect world even stood. I sat back and smiled, not out of revenge, not out of pride, but out of calm understanding. She had forgotten the weight of my name. She had forgotten who made her life steady while she chased perfection. She had forgotten that the man she erased from her wedding owned the very ground she planned to walk on. I didn't plan anything yet. I didn't move. I just sat there, looking at the papers, letting the truth sink in. The power she had tried to take away had never left me. It had only gone quiet, waiting for me to remember it. And now, I did. I sat at my desk for a long time after that. The papers were still spread out, the contracts stacked neatly, my name printed on everyone. I could feel something change inside me. Not anger, not revenge, but a calm decision rising from a place deeper than pain. I didn't need to shout, I didn't need to fight, and I didn't need to explain. I just needed to choose. I thought about all the times she had looked past me, all the times she had corrected me, dismissed me, hidden me. I remembered her words, "Please don't come." "You'll ruin the photos." I had replayed them again and again in my head. At first, they hurt like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, but now they sounded different. Now, they were simply a truth I could finally accept. She didn't want me there, and I would give her exactly what she asked for. I didn't call her. I didn't tell anyone what I was thinking. I didn't talk to friends or seek advice. I just sat still and let the decision settle. Fathers spend their lives protecting their children, even from themselves. But there comes a time when a man must protect what's left of his dignity. She had made her choice, a wedding without her father. And now, I would make mine. I looked down at my hands, the same hands she had once held when she was small. They were scarred and rough, but steady. These were the hands that had built homes, carried weight, signed contracts, and created a life from nothing. I realized those hands still had power. Quiet, unseen, but real. The kind of power that doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard. I smiled once, not out of joy, but out of peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop begging to be seen by someone who refuses to look. I wasn't going to fight for a place in her picture. I wasn't going to beg to stand beside her while she pretended I didn't exist. If she wanted a wedding without me, she would get one. Not just without me in the pictures, without me in the world of it entirely. I stood up from my chair, folded the papers, and placed them in a single file. It was all there. Every contract, every payment, every piece of the event she called hers. It wasn't rage that filled me. It was resolve. A quiet, steady resolve that came from a lifetime of endurance. I had spent decades giving her everything. Now, for the first time, I would take something back. Not to hurt her, but to remind myself that I still mattered. I walked to the window and looked out at the fading sky. The city lights were coming on, one by one, glowing like tiny reminders that life moves forward no matter what is lost. I took a deep breath, feeling both the weight and freedom of my choice. I had been told not to come to her wedding, and I wouldn't. But there would be no wedding to go to. I turned off the light in my office, the file tucked under my arm. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need applause. I just needed to follow through. She wanted a day without her father. She would have it. A perfect wedding with perfect pictures, just as she wished. Only this time, the perfection would be silence, emptiness, and the echo of everything she had thrown away. I didn't look back as I walked away. Because once a man has made peace with his pain, he no longer needs to. 3 days before the wedding, I woke up early. The sky was gray, the air still. I made my coffee, sat for a moment, and looked at the file on the table. Everything was ready. I didn't rush. I didn't shake. I just moved with quiet purpose. The decision was made, and all that was left was to carry it out. No anger, no noise, just action. I dressed neatly, the same way I used to when going to work. Old habits stayed with me. A clean shirt, polished shoes, steady hands. I locked the door behind me and walked to my car. The roads were calm that morning, almost peaceful. I drove slowly, watching the world move past me. Families walking, children laughing, people busy with their days. None of them knew that this quiet man was about to end a dream he had once helped build. When I reached the venue office, the staff greeted me with respect. They all knew me. My business had worked with them for years. They smiled, offered coffee, asked if I needed anything. I said no. I just wanted to review some documents. My voice was calm, polite, almost soft. No one could guess the storm hidden beneath that calm. I sat down across the manager's desk. The folder opened easily. One by one, I showed the contracts, the signatures, the payment records. My name, clear on every page. The manager's face changed as he realized who truly owned the event. It wasn't the bride, it wasn't the groom, it was the father who had been told not to come. I spoke little. I didn't need to explain. The contracts gave me every right. The manager asked once if I was sure. I nodded. That was all. No words of anger, no stories of hurt, just a simple nod. The pen moved slowly, signing each line, ending each agreement. The sound of the pen scratching the paper was the only noise in the room. With every signature, another piece of the wedding disappeared. The venue, canceled. The catering, withdrawn. The orchestra, released. The flower arrangements, returned. The decorations, the lights, the photographer, all gone. It was like watching a castle of glass quietly fall apart. No one outside knew yet, but the foundation was already gone. When it was done, I closed the folder and stood up. The manager said something, maybe an apology, maybe a question, but I didn't hear it. My mind was quiet, still, empty of emotion. I shook the man's hand, thanked him politely, and walked out. My footsteps echoed through the hallway, slow and steady. Not rushed, not proud, just final. I walked outside and felt the wind brush against my face. The sky was brighter now. People passed by, carrying flowers, laughing, unaware that one man had just erased a celebration worth thousands with a few strokes of a pen. I didn't smile, but I felt something close to peace. Not satisfaction, not revenge, peace. Because for once, I had acted for myself. I didn't look back at the building. I didn't need to. The papers were signed, the decisions made, the wedding was gone, as if it had never existed. And I didn't feel guilty. Because she had told me not to come, to stay away, to disappear. So I did exactly that. I erased myself completely. I got in my car and drove home. The road was long, but quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't think about what would happen when they found out. I didn't need to imagine the calls, the confusion, the shock. That was no longer my burden. I had done what I needed to do. When I reached home, I placed the empty folder on the kitchen table, poured myself another cup of coffee, and sat down. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. It was a new day. The wedding no longer existed, but I did. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt enough. The morning of the wedding arrived. The sky was bright, the air full of promise. Guests began to dress early, checking their invitations, smiling at their reflections. Cars filled with flowers, gifts, and laughter started toward the venue. Everyone expected a perfect day, music, celebration, and beauty. My daughter stood in her white gown, surrounded by her friends, certain that her dream was about to come true. She had planned every detail, every moment, every photo. Everything was supposed to be flawless. But when they reached the gates, something was wrong. The doors were locked. The lights were off. No sound came from inside. The staff was gone. The grand building, once glowing with preparation, now stood empty and silent. Guests waited outside, confused, whispering to one another. Some thought it was a delay. Some thought it was a mistake. Her smile began to fade as she made call after call, her voice rising each time. No one answered. Her fiancé tried to calm her. The photographer looked around helplessly. The musicians waited by their van, uncertain. The guests began to murmur louder. The laughter turned into questions, and the questions turned into panic. People started checking their phones, asking if the event had been moved, if there was another entrance, if someone had made a mistake. But there was no mistake. Everything had been canceled. Quietly, legally, completely. Her hands shook as she called the venue office, the caterers, the decorators. Each number led to silence or to a polite message saying the contract had been closed. Her voice broke when she realized it wasn't a delay. It was gone. Everything. The food, the music, the flowers, the seating, the ceremony. Every part of her perfect picture had vanished. The day she wanted to be remembered forever had been erased before it began. Her mother tried to comfort her, but there were no words that could fix it. The fiancé's family stood apart, whispering, watching. Guests began to leave slowly, one by one, shaking their heads, confused and embarrassed. Some took photos of the locked doors. Some called others to tell them not to come. What was supposed to be a celebration became a scene of disbelief. The sound of phones ringing filled the air like a song of regret. Inside her chest, panic turned into shame. She thought of the photos she wanted, the perfect images, the perfect people, the perfect smiles. But there was nothing left to photograph. Only silence and the sound of her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. The truth was beginning to form in her mind, slow and heavy. Someone had done this. Someone had power she had forgotten about. And deep inside, though she couldn't admit it yet, she knew exactly who. Far away, I sat in my kitchen, the same place I always did. The world outside my window was calm. I didn't need to see the chaos to know it was happening. I didn't need to hear her voice to understand her shock. I had lived my whole life waiting for her to see me. Now she finally would. Not as the man she was ashamed of, but as the man she had underestimated. Back at the venue, her white dress shimmered under the hard sunlight. Her makeup started to smudge, her hands trembled, her eyes red from tears she tried to hide. The guests who stayed behind whispered softly, not out of pity, but out of disbelief. The perfect bride, the one who had planned every second, stood alone outside a locked door that would never open. And just like that, her dream, her flawless, beautiful, perfect wedding, was gone. Not with a fight, not with noise, but with silence. The same silence she had once used to erase me. The hours dragged like years. The guests had gone. The flowers wilted in the sun. The laughter turned to whispers that traveled faster than truth. My daughter sat on the curb outside the empty venue, her gown wrinkled, her eyes blank. The groom paced nearby, his face tight with anger and shame. His parents stood a few steps away, arms crossed, murmuring about money, about respect, about family. Every dream that had been built over months crumbled in one day. The silence was heavier than any noise could have been. No photos were taken. No vows were spoken. The chairs remained stacked, the stage unused, the instruments untouched. The day that was supposed to be full of light now felt darker than any night. She scrolled through her phone, reading message after message, people asking what happened, others sending sympathy, some even laughing behind polite words. Her name began to spread online, connected to a story of failure, of chaos, of a wedding that never was. The groom's family demanded answers. They wanted to know who had done this, why it had happened, how something so big could vanish overnight. She had no answer to give them. Her voice cracked when she tried to explain. She said the contracts had been handled through my company, but she didn't understand how. The more she spoke, the clearer it became. Everything she thought was hers had never been. The shame grew like fire inside her. The vendors refused refunds. The venue stood by the papers. Everything had been canceled properly, within the law. There was nothing anyone could undo. The flowers had been sent back. The caterers had moved on to other events. The band had filled the date with a new booking. What was once her perfect plan was now just a story told in disbelief. The guests whispered that maybe she hadn't paid. Maybe she had lied. Maybe her family wasn't what she claimed. The humiliation spread faster than any truth could stop it. Her fiancé's voice rose in anger. He asked if she had hidden something, if there was more to the story. She tried to explain, tried to say it was me, but the words wouldn't come out right. The more she spoke, the worse it sounded. Tears mixed with her makeup until her face was streaked and pale. He looked at her, not with love, but with doubt. And in that moment, she saw something break in his eyes, something that might never come back. She tried calling me then, again and again. But every call went unanswered. Each ring felt like another wall closing in. She left messages, some angry, some desperate, some full of regret. But the silence on my end never changed. The man she had told to stay away was staying away, just as she had asked. People online began to share the story, a wedding that never happened, a bride left at a locked door, photos of her crying on the pavement. Words like karma and family tragedy filled the comments. The same image she had spent her life protecting, the perfect life, the perfect look, the perfect daughter, now shattered for everyone to see. She had wanted to delete my name from her story, but now it was the only one people remembered. The humiliation was complete. Not through rage, not through revenge, but through truth. A quiet truth written in signatures and silence. She had erased me from her life, and in return, I had erased the world she built on my name. Far away, I didn't smile, didn't gloat, Didn't watch the news. I didn't need to. The lesson had already found its way to her. My name, once unwanted, now echoed through every headline, every whisper, every regret that filled her heart. She had wanted to live without my shadow. Now she couldn't escape it. The daughter who deleted her father's name now carried it, not as honor, not as love, but as a curse she gave herself. I didn't watch the chaos unfold. I didn't turn on the television, didn't open the news, didn't check my phone. The world outside could scream, point, and gossip, but I stayed still. I sat in my chair by the window, the same chair I had fixed years ago, the same one that had carried me through long nights of work and worry. The morning light fell across the floor. My coffee was warm, my heart quiet. I wasn't angry, I wasn't proud. I was simply done. I had spent my life giving, and for the first time, I had taken something back. My peace. I didn't need to see her tears to know they had fallen. I didn't need to hear her voice to know it trembled. I didn't need to witness the crowd outside the venue to understand what had happened. Some truths don't need eyes to be seen. They can be felt in silence. I knew she had learned something that words could never teach. I thought about her as a child again. The small hands that once reached for mine. The soft voice that once called me Daddy in the middle of the night. The way she used to smile when I came home tired. That memory hurt more than any betrayal ever could. Because now, that same little girl had become a woman who told me not to come. I wondered if she remembered the nights I carried her to bed, the mornings I went to work before she woke up, the times I went hungry so she wouldn't. Maybe she did. Maybe that was what hurt her now. I didn't wish her pain. I didn't wish her shame. I just wished she would finally understand. Love isn't measured in money, photos, or perfect words. It's measured in the hands that build, the hearts that forgive, and the silence that endures when no one says thank you. I had spent a lifetime showing her that love, and she had spent hers trying to prove she didn't need it. Now she knew what it meant to lose it. The house was quiet. The cup of coffee in my hand had gone cold, but I didn't move to refill it. I looked out the window, watching people pass, each one carrying their own story. Somewhere out there, she was sitting in her white dress, her eyes full of regret. And though I didn't see her, I felt her. I felt the distance between us, heavy but complete. I thought of the words she had spoken. Please don't come. You'll ruin the photos. That sentence had haunted me for days. Now it sounded different, almost poetic in its cruel honesty. She didn't want me at her wedding, and I had listened. She told me not to come, so I didn't, and neither did her wedding. I took a slow breath, leaned back in my chair, and let the quiet fill the room again. For once, it didn't hurt. The silence felt right. I had done what I needed to do, not out of revenge, but out of love, twisted by years of being unseen. A love that finally found its end, not in shouting, but in stillness. Outside, the sun rose higher. I could hear the faint laughter of children somewhere in the street. It made me smile, just a little. Life would go on. Maybe one day she would knock on my door again. Maybe she wouldn't. It didn't matter now. Some lessons are meant to be learned the hard way, and some fathers have to let the world teach what they no longer can. I finished my coffee, stood up, and washed the cup in the sink. The same routine as always. The same life, just quieter. I looked around the small kitchen, worn, simple, honest, and felt no shame in it. I had nothing left to prove, and no one left to please. I whispered one thought in my mind as I turned off the light and walked away. She told me not to come, so I didn't. Neither did her wedding. And for the first time in years, my heart felt light.